Hello and welcome to the Beautiful Business Podcast, where today I'm joined by the amazing Patrice Gordon. Patrice is a leader, a coach and a CEO of her very own impressive business, Eminere, where she consults with businesses in leadership, reverse mentoring and development. Her remarkable career has seen Patrice in senior positions at the likes of BA, Royal Mail and Virgin Atlantic. And today I'm really excited to explore the concept of reverse mentoring on the individual and the organisation, the importance of evolution of roles in the workplace, and we'll also think about the impact diverse representation in the leadership team has on the business. Let's hear what Patrice thinks.
If I wanted to be mentored by like a CEO, I would go to them and I'd want to understand like how they did what they did, why they did what they did, but also a bit about their story, because I'm trying to find some similarities there to say, actually, is that so far removed from who I am? Or is that kind of closely aligned? So how much can I develop a relationship to understand the similarities so that I can understand the differences, but also not focus on the differences, but focus on actually where our paths are aligned? And so with reverse mentoring, the importance behind it is to, yes, learn from people who have a different lived experience from you. Because actually, I always say, like with psychological safety, there's different levels of it. But the highest level of psychological safety is where you feel comfortable to challenge. Like you're in an environment where you feel comfortable to challenge. And so I always say to my teams and people that I take through this program is, you would rather rocks get thrown inside your house and we have like a little bit of rough and tumble disagreement challenge inside the house than people outside the house throwing bricks at you.
Welcome to the Beautiful Business Podcast from the Wow Company. If you're searching for the right strategies, tools and connections to ignite your thinking and elevate your business, then join us for a fortnightly dose of inspiration. Our guests range from industry-leading agencies and cutting-edge tech pioneers to motivational speakers and executives, all offering actionable insights to help you thrive in profit and purpose. So, whether you're a growing consultancy or an agency leader, this podcast is your source of knowledge and encouragement to spark meaningful change in your business and beyond. Patrice, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So I always obviously do a lot of research on the people that are coming onto the podcast, and I often find out a lot about their kind of work achievements, which is always incredible. But I feel like we don't always get to know the person that's underneath. So I like to ask people when they join me to tell us something about you that we might not already know.
Oh, so much under the surface, Chloe, so much. You wouldn't know this about me, that I'm an only child, which means I've got really high need for achievement. So a lot of the stuff that I do is not because like other people tell me to do stuff. It's because like I just want to get things right. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, which is problematic. And I'm really working through that. But on a more personal level, I guess you wouldn't know. I started Latin dancing this year, Latin and ballroom. So I kind of fancy myself as like, next Strictly Come Dancing contestant.
Oh my gosh, yes, amazing. So have you not done this before? This is like,
so I
just
did salsa when I
it.
was probably about 20. And I used to do street dance when I was younger. But I just really enjoy like flow and movement, and it's been on my list for a while to try and tackle. And so I bit the bullet this year and I did like a couple of months of really intensive, which I really enjoyed. And next year I've got like some exciting plans, shall we say, as to how I'm going to expand that part of like my world.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. I love that. Have you kind of dropped back into it quite easily, or did you find it a bit of a challenge?
No, I've got two complete left feet. Absolute like real. And I said I've got like high achievement needs, and then I said I started dancing because it was so frustrating at the start and I was so annoyed with myself. I just couldn't get it. Like I just didn't have any rhythm. I'd lost my rhythm.
Yeah, I was going to say, with your previous dance experience, I'm surprised by that.
I must say that, after I got over and the teachers were super nice as well, very forgiving and very patient. And so like trying new things and being a novice and like being really comfortable in like being a novice is something that I'm getting more comfortable with. So that's what you wouldn't know about me.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that. let's bring it back to business a little bit. Your business is called Eminere, isn't it? What is it all about? Talk to us about it.
What's it all about? Right. So the funny thing is, I named the business before I actually knew what it was going to be. And so Eminere is a derivative of eminence, which means to be highly esteemed or to be one's best. And it's to the power of N when you see it on the website. And that means, for those mathematician geeks out there, to the power of N means that it's infinite. So like you can be as magnificent as you want to be, with like the world is yours, basically. And so when I initially started the business, it was focused on executive coaching. So I retrained as an exec coach 7 years ago. And I really wanted, I think one of my gifts is to help people be their best selves. And that means like really supporting people, speaking life into them, understanding them, giving them a nice safe space to talk out their kind of fears and their limiting beliefs, but help them to overcome those so they can be better. And that's where it started. And now where it currently is, and it's a living thing. I have 4 streams. So the coaching is very important to me. I've really tapped into women's development, just because lots of women reach out to me with very similar challenges. And so I have got my own program that I run. I'm also an adjunct lecturer for the University of West Indies. And I also come in to like run women's development programs for organizations as well. And then my big baby is reverse mentoring, which you can see books on my shelf. And that evolved from me being a reverse mentor for the CEO of Virgin Atlantic in 2018 to lots of things internally, to finally Richard Branson had given me an accolade for the work I'd done in the business, to doing a TED talk around a book. And so now I go across the world and help organizations implement bespoke reverse mentoring programs to answer their organizational challenges.
I feel like reverse mentoring is something that I just didn't know. I actually didn't even really know it existed, until really talking to you, if I'm honest. And I saw that I think it said that it originated in the 90s.
Yeah, with Jack Welch at GE Capital. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably not as new as I thought it was, but still relatively new in the grand scheme, I guess. So yeah, talk to me about reverse mentoring. I remember I actually watched your TED talk where you talked about how Virgin kind of started this thing with you. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of how it's built for you?
And you haven't been living under a rock, Chloe. I promise you. Like,
oh, thank goodness.
when I have conversations with people, I say it like people should know what it is, and then they're like, yeah, and then they come back to it and they're like, can you tell me what it is? The things that we talk about on a day to day is like our second language, and so whilst we live in echo chambers or little chambers of like where we're with like-minded people, so everyone gets it, and then you step out of the bubble and you're like, hold on a second, the whole world is not on the same playing field. And so my job is, which I went like that because I think my job is like, I'm not the first person to come up with reverse mentoring, but clearly my voice is the loudest. Ask ChatGPT, apparently I'm the world leading expert in reverse mentoring, which did make me chuckle. But it really is like, I feel like it's my gift to be able to take all these amazing stories in, translate it, and then lead these programs across organizations. So for everybody on the podcast that doesn't know what reverse mentoring is, do not feel too bad. Reverse mentoring, in my definition, is where we get senior leaders to be mentored by people who are underrepresented in the workforce. And my definition of underrepresented is basically anyone who is not at a senior leadership team table. So, for example, you could have a team full of women and therefore the underrepresented wouldn't be women, right? You wouldn't invite a program for women because actually that cohort or that's already well established around the table. So for me, the intention behind reverse mentoring is to ensure that underrepresented voices have a chance to be heard and listened to. And when we look at our workforces, they're very diverse. So when we look at it from an age perspective, from a gender perspective, ethnicity, disability, like veteran status, there are so many differences within the workplace. And if us as leaders are really trying to lead a workforce that feels like they belong, and if they belong, they're more productive, then it's really important for us to understand what other people think and feel, because it means that when we implement new things, then actually we'll do it from a place of better understanding. And also just makes us a little bit less kind of separate and a little bit more kind of visible alongside the people that we're leading. And we all know that when you get to know your leader, you know, like, and trust them a little bit more. And if you think they understand you, then you develop more trust with them.
So because it's mentoring, I kind of got the impression that it would be around the kind of the job, the work, the business. But I'm also, I mean, it's a little bit on the personal side as well, right? Like you say, it's the representation. So it's about understanding someone else's walk of life. Is that
Yes,
right?
absolutely. So the examples that I always give is if I wanted to be mentored by like a CEO, I would go to them and I'd want to understand like how they did what they did, why they did what they did, but also a bit about their story, because I'm trying to find some similarities there to say, actually, is that so far removed from who I am? Or is that kind of closely aligned? So how much can I develop a relationship to understand the similarities so that I can understand the differences, but also not focus on the differences, but focus on actually where our paths are aligned. And so with reverse mentoring, the importance behind it is to, yes, learn from people who have a different lived experience from you, because actually, I always say, like with psychological safety, there's different levels of it, but the highest level of psychological safety is where you feel comfortable to challenge. Like you're in an environment where you feel comfortable to challenge. And so I always say to my teams and people that I take through this program is, you would rather rocks get thrown inside your house and we have like a little bit of rough and tumble disagreement challenge inside the house than people outside the house throwing bricks at you. And what I mean by that is, if you can't have difficult, challenging conversations about how things could be done better internally because you don't have the right level of psychological safety, you're going to get blindsided by someone or another organization externally who can see the flaws so clearly and are ready to enact on what it takes to kind of overtake you when it comes to, especially when we're talking about innovation, when we're talking about development of products, and when we're talking about keeping the best people within our organizations. Our best people are usually the ones who have great ideas and great ideas that they want to implement within the organization. And if they don't feel like they have a safe environment to share that, then they're going to leave.
And it's such a waste, isn't it, not to have that?
Absolutely.
But why are we not seeing more of this? It sounds like it's effective. It sounds like it's, opening doors. Why are we not seeing more of reverse mentoring?
I think for a few reasons. So the first is, when I started writing the book and researching, you do Google a reverse mentoring, you'll see like hundreds of programs pop up like, oh, this company started this or this scheme has started. But what you fail to see is often like the outcomes and the results of those programs. And so what I did when I was researching the book was I went back to those organizations that had implemented it and tried to find the individuals that participated in the programs. And so some of the stories that we have in the book are from my own experience, but also from interviews that I've done. And so it transpires that some of the fundamental flaws with reverse mentoring programs that have been implemented, especially, around the pandemic time and around like a lot of social unrest, they weren't really managed very well. And what does managing very well look like? For me, it's having a clear objective. So why are we having a reverse mentoring program? What is a problem that we're trying to fix? A lot of the programs that I reviewed were just like listening exercises. And if you know anything about underrepresented people, they are very keen to have their voices heard, but they're also very sick of the unpaid labor and the undue pressure on them to just have these listening exercises with no real tangible actions coming from them. The second thing was really around the psychological safety, as I mentioned, like without a properly run program and proper clear steps in terms of what does that look like, that was rather unsuccessful. Where a program has been implemented without it fitting into kind of a DEI framework or a belonging framework or a HR framework, and it's just kind of stands alone, it's really difficult to then implement the findings from the program, because it's just like on a little island by itself. So it's like, okay, yeah, we've done that, tick. But so what? Like in coaching, we say, and now what? Like, so what now what? What are we going to do with it? And if it's not part of an overall program, it's really difficult to understand like how you're going to, like, what things do you need to do before, what things are you going to do after the program. Depending on the organization, HR's role is different. So some programs are instigated by HR, some by like leaders, and some by like ERGs, so employee resource groups. Now, where they are implemented by employee resource groups, I see they are the most powerful. They have the potential to be the most powerful because there's really passionate people behind it. But passion doesn't always equal action. And so, depending on like where it comes from, like a proper implementation strategy and communication is really important. And that includes like who goes on the program, who are they volunteered or they voluntold? Like, are the senior leaders really keen on not just listening but taking action from what they hear? And then how do we categorize and pull together the wins that we've got, and how does that then flow into like an ongoing piece? So those are all the reasons why things go wrong. And that's why the book was like, that's what I founded the book on, because ultimately it's very powerful when it's done correctly. And it's very, I wouldn't say it's simple. The steps are simple in order for you to get it right. It does take a lot of effort. And I think that's why it's not more prevalent, because you're also looking at a very small population. So two challenges I have is organizations like, can we run a reverse mentoring program? And then I ask them a ton of questions, and then they're like, okay, we don't really think we're ready to do this. And then they probably just go off and do it themselves. And I'm like, okay, do you? Or they want to push for like, can we get this started? And I'm like, there's a few things that I think you need to put in place beforehand. And they feel uncomfortable with that. And then they're like, actually, no, this is just not the right time for us to do it because we don't have the energy from the leadership team. So I think it's very important to get expert helping when you're starting something. But I also think it's equally important for the organization to run it internally themselves, because then it's more genuine. And then if you need an external consultant to come and tap in, then definitely get that. But I'm not an ongoing project manager. I'm like a fire starter. I'm a catalyst instigator. I start with a pilot program, which is between 15 to 20 leaders matched with 15 to 20 people who are underrepresented. And that is a real heavy piece of work. So I take them through a whole program, which begins with like, this is what the program is. So everyone's super clear when they're applying for it. It is an application process. I do blind matching to ensure that we've got different people in different parts of the structure. So that's one of the things that I encourage to support psychological safety, that they're not in the same hierarchy, because otherwise it can just get a little bit complicated. Once they are approved as a mentor, and then we do the matching either before or after, there's like a training session for both the mentors and the mentees. And then as we go through the program, depending on the organization, they can tap into me for additional coaching, but I will check in with the internal team, depending on whether they have me like hands-on or whether there's an internal team and I'm just consulting with them. I will check in with them. Are there any challenges? Do we need to tweak it? Obviously, I have like this plan, but I work really closely with the internal team to make sure that it hits properly, like the language that we're using. I'm understanding the nuances within the organization, and they know that I'm like their trusted advisor who's impartial, right? And my intention is to run a really successful reverse mentoring program. And I think the reason why myself and the team are so successful is I've sat around leadership team tables as a senior commercial leader or a senior finance leader for over 10 years. And so I have that in my toolkit, but also I'm an executive coach, and now I'm this like reverse mentoring expert. So the experience that I bring is from a very practical business perspective, but also I can ask some really deeply insightful questions. And also with my background of being like a tried and tested inclusive leader, I'm challenging them from a place of like, do you want to be better? And if you want to be better, then here are some prompts for us to really dig into. And it's not a telling off. It's like, you brought me on board to help you be better. So let's dance.
Yeah. Not that this is right, but I can understand why people would say, wow, that's a lot of energy to bring.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of it? You know, why are you so passionate about it? What makes you keep going, even though it must be really hard sometimes?
Yeah. I've seen the transformation in leaders and in teams. It started off with my personal journey, and just to backtrack a bit, I was invited in to be the reverse mentor for the CEO of Virgin Atlantic at the time in 2018. I'd already been in those rooms for my expertise, but this is the first time I was invited in as like a Black female. And so for me, it was the first time in my career that I actually felt seen, very ironically, because I was in those rooms anyway, and I bossed it. I was like commercial, like I was finance director. I was like all of this stuff. But I realized how much of myself I wasn't bringing to the table because maybe I didn't feel safe to, even though like obviously I turn up and I was like woman. But like there was just something about being invited in my whole capacity that I found really transformational. And it was very safe for me as well. It kind of took down some of the armor, and with that vulnerability that he showed as well, it allowed us to form a relationship in a space where we were really just trying to get to know each other and get to the core of like what makes us each other, but then also then tapping into like how do we make Virgin Atlantic a more inclusive place to be for everybody. And so because of my magical experience, I was like, this is a really great idea. And then I obviously tapped into it and looked at the research. But the reason I keep doing it is because I've seen the change within leaders that I work with. And so you got to understand, like they're learning about reverse mentoring, but I'm also coaching them on conversations as well. And more powerfully, I'm coaching the group together when we come together on those like in between parts, because we're trying to find the energy, what's going on, like what's the underlying, like you say that the biggest challenge that we've got is communicating, but you guys communicate really regularly. Like there's a cadence, we've got this, but then something's not hitting because clearly people are still talking about this communication piece. So what is it about and behind that communication that is not resonating with people? And that is, I say that, but communication is the biggest thing that comes up in a lot of these programs. So like the intention is usually very, very pure from a leadership perspective, but it's just not translating to people. And I think when we look at communication, like we know when we watch TV, or like you can tell when someone is genuine with their communication, when it's heartfelt, when it's empathetic, when they really get it. Removing the barrier for me of that is the most powerful thing. So, you know, with leaders, normally they can sponsor a program. They can be like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. But this is forcing leaders to sit in that seat of a little bit of discomfort, encouraging them to be vulnerable, but also courageous. Like it takes a lot of courage to be a mentee in these programs because there's no barriers. Like there's no, like you're face to face. And you are you choose to have, but you have to like release that armor in order to have a genuine connection. For people on the other side, for the mentors, they feel like they are finally seen and heard, like a bit like me. But most importantly, they also form a cohort. So, you know, these silos that, you know, senior leaders tend to have like at least like quarterly meetings together if they're from different departments, right? But people who are mentors from different parts of the business, they might not have a natural way to come together to share their experiences. And so actually the powerful part I've seen from the mentor perspective is that they kind of get together, they realize they're not the only ones who are dealing with stuff. But most, you know, a lot of these sessions and where I take the teams through, it's not about having a moan, right? It's not about airing dirty laundry. It's about sharing from a perspective of like, this is my lived experience. And this is genuinely, if we get to the right point, how I would do things differently if I was in charge because of X, Y, and Z. And so the magic that I see in those rooms where people come up with solutions or have ideas, but then because of the structure that we've set up, they feel empowered to kind of get on with it and like come up, like to take steps to do things as opposed to waiting for authority. It's just magical. And that's what you want. You want in your organizations for them to step into that space. And I genuinely think as we move forward, we have like 5 generations in the workforce already. We've got, you know, AI coming in and we know what coming in, AI is here. And when we look at the roles of the future, it's about people who are able to connect the dots. It's about people who are able to like communicate really effectively and impactfully across the organization to be able to get things done. And I think that developing good relationships within allowing reverse mentoring to allow you to develop good relationships with your mentor mentee, but also as cohorts across the field is really going to be one of the key things that is going to help organizations to succeed in the future. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah, I can feel that. It's awesome. And it's like so great to listen to. I love listening to when people are passionate about something because you can just feel why it's such a benefit, right? One of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was, or is, the keeping the energy fresh with leadership, right? I know we've kind of had a small conversation about this before, about how leaders can sometimes just sort of tend to stay in that position too long and maybe not move out the way for that fresh energy coming into those positions. Now, you have worked, as you mentioned earlier, at some huge organizations, right? Your background is incredible. And I just wonder, from your experience there, how is that kind of, or how does it correlate with those bigger organizations and people not stepping out of those leadership positions? Do you see it a lot?
Yeah, I do. I do see it a lot. So from my personal experience, so I've worked with 4 big brands, like as an employee. So PwC, British Airways, Royal Mail, and Virgin Atlantic are my 4 big brands that I've worked with. And I think as I moved through, I discovered different alternative ways, right? So I'll start with BA, because at BA I was promoted to a manager when I was 25 within a year of being there, and I moved 5 times in 6 years. So I did 4 roles at manager level across different areas, because there was no upward, like there was only 3 levels there. So there was only one way for me to get more experiences to move across. And so, obviously as like a 26-year-old, I'm like, this is ridiculous. But what a great experience. Like that has been the best experience for me. And then moving to Royal Mail, where I was finance director, and then Virgin, I kind of moved around. I moved from finance into commercial, which was a really big deal. So I relinquished my finance expertise and title to move across. And that was a really big deal for me. But I say that to say, in organizations now, like a lot of the structures are pretty flat. They're getting flatter, and there's much more matrix organization, and a lot of I say the youth, a lot of conversations that I have with the Gen Z, and who I have like 2 Gen Z mentors, by the way, and I do a lot of work with like that generation because they are just incredible. But really trying to impress upon them that it's not that, just move up, up and up. It's about actually how do you gather that whole skill set, which means that you are able to be that dot connector. And I also think that with the change in like how organizations are structured, so when we're looking at the technology that we're bringing in, etc., it's really important for you to have a greater range. And so there's a lot more like all of the HR journals, etc., are talking about range now. They're talking about being generalists as opposed to specialists, because actually it's important for us. Like, it's important to get specialists to a certain area. I always say that. Like, for me, getting my chartered accountancy and then getting to finance director was my point of, actually, I've done this, and I've done this to a really high level. And that's when I retrained as an exec coach. I think there's a real delicate balance between like this specialism and generalism, like track. For me, as I said, I like this bit of freshness. So I want to get to a certain level before then I can say, right, let me move on to the next thing. Because I think that in general, that just gives you a little bit more credibility to show that you're able to complete something and then go on to do something else. Everybody, whether they're just coming into an organization or where they are right now, they need to think about, actually, what is it that fills my cup? What is it that motivates me, and what skills what job is it that I'm really interested in, and can I start like playing around with that in my own time before then I take a big leap into switching over to it completely. And that, to be honest, is a lot of the conversations that I have. Say like 70% of my coaching conversations are people doing jobs that I don't want to do anymore. Like, that's already like from a scale of like I'm doing it, I'm not really sure if I want to do it, to I've been doing this for a really long time and I'm sick of it now and I want to pivot and do something different. But I've got to this level of expertise and I don't want to give up the status or the money that has come with that role. And so now how can I pivot my mind to get into a position where I can switch to do something different?
I feel like the younger generation, the Gen Z lot, are much better at being okay with trying different things and moving around into different areas than maybe the millennials and the older generations, who were kind of almost like manufactured into being, this is the avenue that you're at, and you work really hard and you get your head down and you work your way up in that. But and I harp on about this quite a lot, that I still maintain that I think there's almost this pressure for everyone to think that management is the best place to go, right? That's kind of, to have manager in your title or head of is almost where I certainly feel it. And I know a lot of people I know of my age feel that like that's where you should in quote unquote be headed. I actually read that I think it was 63% of millennials just don't feel like they have the training and the capability of being in a leadership position, and that only 11% of HR leaders feel like they've got a strong bench of people to take over. Yeah, next. And that for me, I mean, that feels a bit scary, right? That only 11% of HR yeah, and that we just don't feel ready to be in those management positions.
It's really scary. I mean, I do think there's two things I would say to that. One is there are really a lot of incompetent leaders out there. It's actually really funny. Because probably 63% of the leaders out there probably aren't even competent. So there's a whole thing, right, where we promote, or historically organizations have promoted on individual contributor performance, right? So that means you're a ace salesperson, and then you become a sales manager, and then you become a sales director, but you're a really rubbish people manager. You're just really good at selling. But the only way for us to reward you and for us to see that through is to give you a manager title.
Yeah.
Right. Or in engineering, or like in every single field, like you're really good at something, and then people think, oh, we must promote them, like, or they want to be promoted. The only way for them to get financial recognition is through promotion into a management. Like, okay, you're really good at this, and you just get your head down and you do it. But you know what? We're going to give you 10 people, and we want you to like do the thing that you do, but get those 10 people to do it, and then you just lead the team doing it. That's not everybody's natural skill set. Like, being a leader is not a natural skill set, and if you don't want to do it, then you're going to be a really bad leader, and it's going to work out worse for you, but you're going to get paid great money. And people, this is the challenge that we have. And I think with HR leaders, like, it's not just a current challenge. A lot of the things that I see now, I'm on a consultancy side, is that the web is very tangled in terms of the historic things that need to be corrected. Almost like, how can we tell an established leader who's been in post for like 15 to 20 years that they need to do a leadership course on like how to be a leader? Like, that's not going to go down very well, is it? And so that's where coaching comes in.
Yeah.
Because that's where it's, like some of the fundamentals that I see and what like non-management grade employees share with me is that the way that they want to be led now is not being recognized by their leaders, and they find it really and that's what, people, like, we know that your manager, your leader, is the biggest contributor towards your mental health and well-being within your workplace. So whether are you leading me from a work perspective, or are you a kind person, and do I want to work alongside you? Those two determinants, if they're not in a really good place, then you're going to be really unhappy at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Wasn't it? I think it might have been Forbes that said 50% of people likened their relationship with their manager as important as the relationship with their spouse on their mental health.
Yeah. And we actually probably spend more time with our bosses.
Yeah, absolutely. It's mad, isn't it? But coming back to like length of time in leadership positions and bringing fresh energy in, we know that people jumping around into different roles can have a certain effect. When applying for roles, HR people might go, okay, like typically they've moved around quite a lot. But what is the impact of people staying in a position for too long, a leadership position particularly?
A few things. One, when a person or team stay in situ for a really long period of time, the status quo is established, well established and kept. And that, what I've observed in those situations, is the systems and processes that we need to run organizations impactfully is kind of sidestepped, because we've got people in the mix that know how to work around the systems. So it's kind of like we're just kind of reconfirming the systems that exist. And I've noticed in a few organizations that those leaders love the systems and don't necessarily want to change the systems, because that's where their power comes from. So when you're in those positions and you're tenured and the system's a little bit complex and there's workarounds to have, it means that those individuals can hold on and yield the power, because everyone has to come to them for like the solutions, because they're like, it's like Game of Thrones. especially some of the older school organizations, where change is not so much welcomed, you definitely see that. Um, I also think that the younger generation and other individuals who are not so patient are not going to hang around to wait for the change of guard. They're not going to, like dead man's shoes. They're not going to wait for that. They will be increasingly frustrated. There will be that disengaged lot in your kind of Gallup survey. You might even find them to be a bit disruptive. If they can't leave the organization, they just become disruptive because they're kind of like, well, you can't get rid of me because I'm doing a good job, and then they become disruptive. So some of the behaviors that I've seen have kind of ranged that span. It's really hard, especially in organizations. Like I talked about status before, but I do a lot of work around like ego and power and status, right? So ego, like how closely do you say that your personality and your self-worth is attached to your job? Yeah. Your status, like, is your status at work reflective of your status in society, or do you see that? And when you're playing at real high stakes, that is true. Yeah. So I've experienced it from a very lesser perspective of, for example, the invites that I used to get when I was like head of commercial strategy director for Virgin Atlantic are very different to the invites that I get now, let's say, right? And so before I left, I knew I needed to do some work on the ego to like account for the fact that that would happen. But like, seriously, guys, invite me to some stuff, man. Like, it's an invite. But from that perspective, and then like from a power perspective, power is associated with the role that you have, the title that you have, and the status that you have in society. So those three things are a really interesting play, because when you get to senior levels, like C-suite and just below C-suite, it's not just a job, because it's those three things that are ascribed to it. So you're not asking someone just to leave their job. You're asking people to leave like the power that they yield, the status that they have within society or within like industries or whatever, and you're asking people to set aside their ego to say, actually, my time here's done. I need to move on to somewhere else. So it is. And also within organizations and within industries, there's a hierarchy, right? And so are you willing to give up that hierarchy to start again in another organization? And it's a really complex. And I think when you get older and when you're in that, it's much harder, because you've worked so hard at those different levels to get that status, to get that power. And you've got an ego because you're really good at what you do. For the younger ones, and I'm not saying this not in a patronizing way, but those who have not necessarily done the time, they realize that there is more to life than just work. Their identities are not tied to that organization, not tied to that role, not tied to status. So their ability to move around is so much greater than people who've been in those organizations for a while. And so that's the really interesting thing that it's like a sociological experiment, but that's what I find fascinating. And it's so interesting when I'm coaching people who are like entry point leadership to C-suite leaders who are moving through that space. And it's about separating, like I said, that ego from the organization, the status from the organization, and allowing people to just be whole as themselves. Like I struggled when I stepped into like entrepreneurialism 2 years ago. Like I used to walk in a room and I used to say, I am Patrice, I'm commercial strategy director for Virgin Atlantic. That said it all. Now I go into a room, I have to gauge like what room is it I'm in and what title am I going to give, right? I'm like an author, I'm a commercial strategy director, I'm a chartered accountant, I'm an executive coach, like I'm a wannabe dancer. Like that's a lot of things that I am. But then the next question is, oh yeah, but what did you do before? What did I do before I was all this stuff? Because that stuff's great, but like, what was I before I was doing what I'm doing right now? Because in society, we always ascribe, it's like, it ascribes you to your last relevant role, right? So, okay, maybe if I said people start to, like, you could go on LinkedIn, it's hilarious. It's like, I'm a two times exit founder entrepreneur, which means that like, okay, fine, I've done this entrepreneur thing that validates me. I've like exited 2 businesses, which meant that I was able to like put together a proper business model and it has been valued. So like our value is based on our title and the role that then someone can place you, like, where are you in that pecking order? Like, And so, yeah, it's a really difficult thing, especially if you have spent your whole life working towards a title, working towards a current like status, to then proactively and intentionally give that up and step into a different space. Of course, it's hard. Like it's really hard.
Yeah. That is fascinating thinking about it from that ego state as well. I've never actually considered that. Like you say, having to, you walk in and your title is you, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I'll say I'm just Patrice now. Just Patrice.
Just Patrice. Should be like, I'm the Patrice. So you have obviously worked at these with and for these massive organisations. And I'm really intrigued to know, a lot of our listeners will have, by comparison, much smaller sized businesses, medium, small sized. How do you think it translates down, all of that ego state and moving out of the leadership position and the kind of worry of giving up that stuff? How does it translate to those people who have created an agency or a consultancy or something that they are doing from maybe their heart, a bit more emotional about it, you know, something that they're passionate about, a bit more creative in that creative space? How do you think that kind of translates to those sorts of businesses?
It's much worse, isn't it? I mean, you've left your job. You thought you could do it by yourself, and you thought, right, I'm going to create something. The ego is much worse. And I said before, like, we have to have a certain amount of audaciousness to believe that our little seed of an idea can grow into a viable business that not only employs us but employs other people too. And for me personally, I have a personal boardroom of individuals that I share my plans with on an biannual basis. I have two coaches. I have quite a few mentors in different spaces. And I have people who know me like spiritually and like deeply spiritually and personally, and that I have to like balance me out. And what I do with that is they have full permission to pull me up and pull me out of my ego if they if they experience or see me operating within it. And by deep and as a invitation, I am vulnerable with them in terms of this is what I'm aiming towards, like in 5 years, this is what I want to do this year. They will message me and they'll say, Patrice, like, I've just seen X, Y, and Z. Why are you doing that? And then I'll give them the rationalization, and they were like, okay, well, it's kind of off track in terms of where you like what we had talked about previously. So talk me through that. Like, so they have full permission to hold me accountable. And I think when you get more senior in organizations or as a leader, like I have decision fatigue all the time, thinking I need to know all the answers. But actually, there is real like joy in if you can embrace vulnerability and trust people around you. You have to have the right people around you. There are some snakes, like, but be careful. But I would say you need to check back to your intentions as an entrepreneur, as like a business owner, as a medium business owner. What is it? What is your objective? Is your objective to like build an empire? Why do you want to build an empire? What is the route behind it? The creativity, like, do you want to do, you can do good for the world and be a millionaire too. There's nothing wrong with that. But like where that intersection is, like, how do you hold yourself accountable? And I genuinely think that, look, my business is not going to get to where I need it to get to without external help and support. And in the last year, I've realized that. And I've like firmly hooked into some other things that are going to help me to elevate my business. But that required me to step away from my ego and to say, actually, I've done all I can do here. I've taken it as far as I can. And in order for me to spread this message further and to like be a good custodian of this gift that I've been given, I'm going to have to release that, and I'm going to have to step into different spaces. And so I think for business owners, it's always that check of like, it's about your intention. Like, what is your mission for the business? What is your personal intention? Do you want to grow talent? Do you want to develop talent? Do you want to be known for being excellent at this? And do you want like, I think I keep on talking about AKQA because I think what he's done is just incredible. And the fact that he's got like probably 1,000 applications per like job that he has advertised, and is a real testament to the culture that he's built there. So like, yes, you want an amazing product and you want an amazing output and you want clients to want to work with you because you're leading edge and innovative. But actually what you really want is people to be clamoring to work within that organization, because if people are clamoring to work in your organization, it means you've built a really good culture that people want to be part of, and people will by default be proud of working for that organization because your output is really high quality as well. And for me, yes, obviously I want a great output, but like for people wanting to like clamor to be inside my organization, it also means that that collective intelligence that we have within our organization is going to be high, right? Which means that like actually we're going to be just a really hot team. And I love that. Like I love high performance teams, right? Because I want my teams to like come in, hit the ground running, have like high energy, want to deliver a high quality product, but also most importantly, be good colleagues to their friends, be good custodians and friends to their colleagues. Because ultimately, when we like all like when we one of us does a bad job, it looks bad on all of us. So let's like collectively make sure that we're like delivering excellence both internally and externally. Like when I was in organizations, like my team was like a mini business, and I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to run my business. And so I think that just kind of translates into like when you're running your own thing as well.
Yeah, I love that. I really do love that. I love how you can bring it right back to actually what you're doing now, even though you've been in these incredibly large businesses yourself as well. And it does. The message is the same across all, whether you're large, small, medium. It's all about the intention, right? And kind of what you're setting out to achieve. I want to really talk to you about representation within leadership, particularly, but just within organizations as well. You're part, I think you mentioned it before, but you're part of some incredible kind of support groups, aren't you? Was it just particularly women in business or?
No, so I was actually doing my list because I was like, I need to really be intentional next year about everything that I'm involved in. So I'm part of Harvard's Women's Leadership Board, which is part of the Harvard Kennedy School and the Women in Public Policy program. So that's like a big commitment of mine. I'm part of Women in Aviation and Aerospace Charter. I'm one of the committee members for that. I'm part of Soho Works and Soho House, so I do a lot of work with other entrepreneurs within those spaces. I am a part of the Accenture and Henley Business School diversity supplier development program, which has got 10 entrepreneurs as part of the program for a year. And then I'm also part of the HSBC Ready to Supply program. That's just for women. So yeah, I'm part of a few things.
How do you have time to get up and go to the gym in the morning? Honestly,
the thing is, the mental and the physical movement, like the physical movement first thing in the morning, like journaling, praying, like meditating, all that jazz. I need that, otherwise I'll go crazy. But that's my thing that I do have control over. There's everything else in my day I don't. Just like really. And so like that sacrosanct part of my morning is just so like I've been off schedule for about 4 days now. And like, so going back in this morning, I was like quite pleased with myself, but it's what I need to operate. Like it's one of my, like my hierarchy of needs.
yeah, I love that. I love it. So yeah, you're part of a few things. When it comes to representation and leadership, what do we think? Do we think we're evolving? Do we think we're doing it in the right way? You know, we hear all sorts, right? We hear gender, race, religion, sexuality, all of these things coming into play. We need to have more diverse representation. Are you seeing it that way? Is it evolving the way we should be?
I think it was evolving. I think we've unfortunately taken some steps backwards in the recent backlash over in the US, which has translated into the UK. I think that in kind of 2021, it was very, very popular to have like more diversity, but we've seen those roles pulled back. We've seen that kind of, even when we're talking about chief diversity officers, those roles have dwindled quite significantly. I think that there was always a business case for it because the numbers don't lie in regards to when you have more representation from different people at higher levels within the organization, the results speak for themselves. So like higher levels of happiness and engagement within the team, but most importantly, the bottom line financial numbers have been proven. So there's a number of studies that show that. And actually I was at a Blue Book event last week and they've just done a new report about women in capital. And it talks about how organizations that have been run with women have higher financial returns in established economies, and where there are economies which are emerging, there's less volatility with their results than if they have a woman leading the organization versus a man. So there's like a ton of evidence. I personally, and like some people do live under a rock, but this is important for us to keep on talking about it because I think in the ether, you have lots of noise around like diversity is bad and representation is bad because it means that you're lowering standards, which is absolutely not the case. Because ultimately, if you are a person from an underrepresented background and you get to a certain level within an organization, I bet you $1 billion that the hoops that you've had to jump through to get to that point and have had to show your receipts and demonstrate at a much higher level than everybody else is significantly greater than everybody else around the table. So I get incredibly, obviously frustrated, but I have to say the story all the time because it's no point in me being impassioned about it because I'll just give you the numbers. I'll give you the numbers, I'll give you the stats, and then we can have a conversation from a place of facts and understanding as opposed to I heard that just because you're a black woman, you've got this role. Like, okay, let's talk about the numbers, right? So I think that's really where it comes down to. Like, we are in a place now where certain things have happened which seem to give a lot of people permission to kind of backtrack on their promises in terms of what they said that they would do for the good of the world. But also the facts do show like that more diverse teams that, backing on what I said before, if you've got like a more diverse team that has a high level of psychological safety, you're going to get more innovation. You're going to get more challenge. You're going to get more innovation. And it means that we can have these discussions and disagreements within our house more so than another external competitor coming in with like a same idea, but because we didn't feel safe to have it, someone else has had that conversation. Someone else has come up with a great idea because their environment is safer to have that. Do you know what I mean? So I think it comes down to like, do you want to have true higher performance, true productivity? Do you want a happier workforce? Or do you want to hold on to the power and the power structures that be because it serves you better?
Great question. What do we need to do then, though, Patrice? Because I'm sure many people listening would love to see more representation, right? We all want to see that. I say the collective we, but you know what I'm saying. How do we do that without kind of doing what you like, ticking boxes and doing it just because someone is a different race or a different gender or a different whatever? How do we do it? What's the answer?
It takes the people in power to want to do it, and they need to put themselves in spaces where they feel a little bit uncomfortable. So, for example, 9th and 10th of December, Bloomberg held their inaugural Women, Money and Power conference in London. And it was the first time they'd done it. And it was literally an all-female panel of women talking about, like, from investment bankers, like assets, like the highest levels of operations within, like, that finance field. And there were a couple of men who came. They were allies, and they were coming along to see all this incredible female talent. So we're talking about, incredible women who were on stage and in the audience that given up 2 days of their time to attend. Like almost 500 women from all around the world had come in. And, when people say that they can't find the talent, I have found from my perspective, I'm not invited into a lot of rooms, right? So I will go into spaces where I am welcomed and invited. So all those places that I listed, I am welcomed and I'm invited into those rooms. So if your environment is not welcoming to people of difference, then you need to get yourself into those environments. You need to dedicate a bit of your time and show up in person, and actually just observe and like put yourself in that space where you feel a little bit uncomfortable so you can observe the talent. If there is like absolutely no hiding place right now until the talent is there. They've just formed their own little groups because they're not welcome into, or in the same vein, they're not as welcome into those bigger rooms. Like the amount of, there's a month for everybody, there is a day for everybody. Like just go to those spaces if you are really that curious, or sponsor some of those things for those spaces, and actively put your company in those spaces so that they can observe the talent that's there. Because those people that give up their time and their energy to go to these events, these conferences, all of this stuff, taking time out of your day job, taking time out of your business to enhance your skill set, those are the type of people that you want in your organization. Yeah. So you've already got the cream of the crop in that room, right? So I just feel like leaders and like talent acquisition teams, etc., they need to put themselves in those spaces a lot more frequently and often because their spaces are there. They're just not. Companies that are not interested are not in those rooms.
It's interesting. Something you said there was if your environment isn't welcoming, then you go to those environments. And I wonder, have you got any advice for somebody who might be listening, who might not have the most welcoming environment, but doesn't actually know why? Like, it's very innocent, but they don't understand why they're not attracting diverse talent. What does a welcoming environment look like, Patrice?
I think it's different things for different people. I have observed like a complete diversity wash of brochures and websites, and then you go into the organization, it actually looks nothing like that. It's not representative or reflective of what's happened inside. I think, the employee engagement survey, depending on how large your organization is, does tell a lot, and maybe asking some of those questions. I think this is becoming more popular, but having an external supplier conduct your exit interviews is quite powerful, because a lot of the time that when people leave, they don't actually want to share why they're leaving. Like, they want to share like the depths of it, right? Also, if you're in a creative or a smaller industry, like the industry talks too. So it's a real delicate balance between telling your truth, but also sharing things that people might not receive in the best way. So do you know what I mean? It just can get a little bit messy. So I would say having an organization which can tap into those exit surveys is quite important. But also as a leadership team or as an environment, like maybe getting a consultant in to come in and like do some interviews to assess like what it is about that organization, why people enjoy working there, and is there a trend of certain people that are working there, etc., and what can be alienated. Like, when I joined Virgin at the start, I really didn't get it. I didn't enjoy it. It was so friendly. I was like, I was really strictly corporate, like, and they were just super friendly. I was like, I don't really understand. Like, why is everyone asking me these questions? Like, how was your weekend? It's fine, thanks. Like, people hung out with each other and everything. I was like, this is really I come to work. I like don't really, and I realized that like I got with the program after a while and obviously loved it, but some people wouldn't. Like, that's just not their work style. And then like to go back into a corporate after that, after having that magical experience of Virgin, like to go back into like a strict corporate, that's why I was like, actually, I think I'm going to work by myself for a while. And structure it. But you know what I mean? Like, and so especially in the creative industries or different organizations have an energy, they have like that culture. And so what is it about you need as individuals? You need to be honest about you understanding what your values are and in which cultures you thrive in. And then also for organizations, I think, on that same vein, like that familial, like our organization as a family is very dangerous. Yeah. And really tapping into what does that really look like? And could you be unknowingly ostracizing people within that like close-knit culture who don't feel like they fit?
Yeah.
So I find that a lot with the creative and entrepreneur, because you hire people who you vibe with. Like, that's what you do when you've got like a 10-person team. You hire people that you vibe with. You're not going to hire someone that you don't vibe with. Like, that's just natural, isn't it? And so as the business gets bigger, that's even more of a problem, because everyone's just hiring people that they vibe with, and to create this like family. But then that's not necessarily the most inclusive place to be, and that's something that I have to be really aware of personally as I grow my business.
Okay, Patrice. So we've covered a lot of ground today. And, we've talked about your reverse mentoring and leadership and representation. I've got to ask, we ask every guest, what does beautiful business mean to you?
Beautiful business means running a sustainably profitable business, but it means doing it in a way that brings you joy. So for me, like, this chapter of my life is about joy. It's about like following my path and accepting my gifts. And I have the beautiful gift of being able to work with clients that I choose to work with. And so I think if we are creating things in this world, they should be from like an intentionally pure and beautiful place. And I think accepting that beautiful and pure can also make money is incredible, because actually we are helping other people build their lives and fulfill their dreams too. And I think big businesses can still be beautiful. But I have a special little thing that I'm building right now, which is beautiful in its incubation period. And I just hope and pray that I get to do this and enjoy what I'm doing like for the rest of my days. So doing something that you love, that makes money, that actually changes the world as well, I think is an incredible gift to have.
Oh, I love that answer. And considering, I love your phrasing as well, the incubation period. Considering you're in that early stage, have you got any advice for anyone looking to build that beautiful business who might be in that early stage?
Yeah. I would say I took a lot of pressure off myself. Mhm. Now I look at it and I say that, but I worked 7 days a week for about 18 months. So whilst I was still in full-time employment, I was building this business in the evening and weekends. And so I was close to burnout. And then I realized actually I've got to make a choice. Which one am I going to pick? So I think that naturally comes. That's like you can straddle for a while and then that decision point naturally comes. And for me, it was, have I got enough savings to survive for a year in terms of like my bills, but also living life? And that was my deadline. And so when I reached that, I'm like, okay, you have to make a decision now, Patrice. This is where my personal boardroom came into effect. They were like, okay, you are exhausted. Like, when is enough going to be enough for you? Because you said X, Y, and Z. And so I think not take it. There's this really great book there's lots of great entrepreneurial books, but one of the books that I read a long time ago was Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And Elizabeth Gilbert is the lady that did Eat, Pray, Love. And so Big Magic is really about like tapping into your creativity. Like I didn't think I was creative at all. But it was about tapping into your creativity, not putting too much pressure on yourself in this creativity. So like people are like, okay, I want to become an artist, and they quit their job and then they start painting. And then there's so much pressure on them because they're like, I'm trying to make a living from this painting, right? And so I think that the way that I did that was really helpful for me because with my control needs that I have, and not the business not flowing in the way that I thought it would flow in year one or even year two, if I'm honest, having that cushion and me being able to make decisions with a lot more breathing space than from a place of abundance as opposed to a place of scarcity was really important to me. It means that I made better business decisions because I had the space to do that. And so I'd say for people who are in that incubation period, like if that ship has sailed, then fine. But if you are thinking about stepping out, just build yourself some resources because ultimately finances is the key thing like that makes or breaks an organization. But your own like your ability to be able to live, breathe, and have a good life whilst you're building something beautiful. Like for me, that was the dance that I wanted. I didn't want to be like desperate and scarce. I wanted to enjoy this time, which as you can see, I'm enjoying it, right? I'm enjoying it. And I think if you have the ability to do that, you should definitely take that approach in terms of building something up. And something that I've dabbled with is like when times have got hard and like my deals take ages to come in. Like the longest time it's taken for a reverse mentoring program to come through is 18 months, which is so painful. Like I literally, that's like my biggest adjustment in this outside world. And in those times I've really thought actually maybe I'll just go back and do like some freelance consulting and like just get back on like just doing some part-time things, which I've thought about quite frequently because I have a really nice life and I like nice things. So do you know what I mean? And it's that and no shame when it comes to that. So for me, I've been working through like not feeling like it has to be this or that. It can be an and this is what I coach my people through. So I've had to take my own advice here, right? Like it can be an and because it's an and doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means that actually you need to just re-up on something to allow yourself to be able to flow in this other state. And so I think there's a lot of pressure to be like this or this or this or this. And I think as we're entering into like these spaces where you can be more than one thing, tap into the resources that you have in order to live the life that you desire and take the pressure off yourself to do something. I think a good amount of stretch and pressure is good. Because it encourages you to like drive harder but then if I go off and do a part-time gig and I'm really not enjoying it, then that's a real slap in my face to tell me I need to get back on the bike and focus on the other thing that I need to focus on. But it's all a choice. We all have a choice in the moment. So it's about using those choices and not beating yourself up about them and really having people around you that will hold you to account when you need to be held to account, but also give yourself grace and know that like this entrepreneurial thing is hard because it's not like A plus B doesn't equal C. Like I'm saying, my most frequently quoted word, this statement this year was my inputs are not equaling my outputs. I'm not in here. I'm not seeing it. I'm like planting the seeds. Where is not growing? Like my inputs are not equaling my outputs. But I think that, I have a few words I'll leave you with my 3 words for next year, and that I've already decided on. One is expansiveness, because I believe that the world is abundant and I just need to step into that expansiveness. The second is momentum, because I feel like with all these little seeds that I've been planted, all these different things that I'm on, I'm feeling a really great energy of me really just having complete clarity in terms of who I am and where I want the business to be. So they're all aligned now. And the third thing is embodiment. Like, I want to completely embody like everything that I am in order for me to get to where I want to get to for 2025.
That's beautiful. I love that. And you will, I can feel it. No, honestly, Patrice, speaking with you today has just been incredible. Like, I've learned so much from you, and I'm sure our listeners will have done as well.
Thank you.
And I love the experience that you bring, but also the fact that like you're still you, and like, I can really sense how passionate and how caring you are about it all. And I think that is, just a path for success. So lovely to chat to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Beautiful Business Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please remember to subscribe and leave us a review. For more advice and practical tips on what it's really like to build a beautiful business, visit our content hub at wowco.uk/hub, or check out the link in the show notes.